Hello and welcome to the sixth episode of MAAWG-5. My name is Sam Silberman. I'm an officer on the MAAWG board. We're here to discuss the latest anti-abuse efforts and developments across the online ecosystem. Today's guest, we have Brian Scriber, co-chair of the MAAWG IoT SIG and VP of Security and Privacy Technologies at Cable Labs, and Ash Wilson, Vice Chair of the MAAWG IoT SIG and Technical Director at Valley Mail. Today, the duo led the MAAWG IoT SIG, bringing together industry professionals to help shape a safer, more secure future for connected devices. Brian is a distinguished technologist and Vice President of Security and Privacy at Cable Labs, where he focuses on IoT security, standards, converged network security, and the role of technology in privacy policy. Ash is the director of IoT and within the Standards and New Technologies group at Valley Mail. He worked with organizations like MAAWG and IETF to standardize authentication patterns to make the internet a safer place. Ash is currently involved in efforts to standardize DANE for client and sender identity via the Danish Bird of the Feather group at IETF. Welcome, both of you, to MAAWG-5.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
So today we're taking a deeper look at the work MAAWG IoT Security SIG is doing, looking at where the group is focused in its efforts in recent months and where they see the future of IoT security heading. So, Ash, can you give us an overview of what the IoT SIG is doing?
The IoT SIG at MAAWG is broadly focused on anti-abuse activities within IoT applications, and that has to do with the prevention, detection, and mitigation of abuse. And some of the challenges that we're working against right now in the IoT SIG require building bridges to solve. And that means getting decision makers and stakeholders across the industry together to compare notes and to craft anti-abuse strategies and best common practice documents that the larger industry can pick up and run with. IoT is a growing area of focus for a variety of reasons, but probably the most obvious one is that the ratio of devices to humans in the modern workplace and in the modern home is increasing. And in many situations, connected devices outnumber human beings. And so as IoT becomes more pervasive in our lives, we can offload some of our decision-making to these devices and applications. And when you consider the impact of business email compromise might be measured in dollars lost from compromising a human within a company to get them to make a bad decision. If you compromise an IoT application that's involved in managing critical infrastructure, then you start to count that in the number of lives impacted. And so that's why we take IoT very seriously, and that's why the focus on IoT.
Brian, it's no secret that IoT or connected devices are experiencing widespread adoption, from smartwatches to doorbells, smart appliances, refrigerator. It seems everything is now connected. How does this surge in devices make the need for robust security an even bigger priority amidst the pandemic, with all the dramatic shifts in consumer behavior? Any trends you're seeing around IoT devices?
Sure. Particularly over the last year, we've seen people engage in a lot of projects, home improvement. We've seen Home Depot and Lowe's do extremely well. Part of that are the purchase of automation devices, sensors, as well as some of these smart home devices. And the number of devices that are connected to a given home has increased from where we were 5 years ago, where we had 5 to 10 devices that an average home had online. And now if you go and take a look at your router at home and look at how many devices are connected to your internet at any given time, you're going to see things have changed. And the average home now is over 20 devices. As that continues to increase, we start to run up against an interesting line that used to be for CIOs, for small businesses. It was, hey, once you've got 50 employees, 50 devices on your network, you would want to have a sysadmin come in and help manage those devices. When you hit 100, you'd want to have a second sysadmin or somebody to come and help. Today's homes don't have that. And so these devices are coming into homes. We're exceeding the 50 and the 100 line, where we used to say you need somebody full-time to be able to manage these connected devices. And we aren't seeing the devices come shipped with automatic software updates. We're not seeing some of those tooling that we've seen in other spaces for connected devices, where security patches are being deployed automatically and your vulnerabilities are slowly being protected as the device ages. So this has caused quite a change. And when we start to look at where MAAWG can engage and what we need to do for these devices, when you look at a smart light bulb, right? That thing is plugged in. It has power all the time. It has computational ability. It has memory, and it has the network credentials that you gave it when you brought it and put it into your network. And so it is a computer. It is not a light bulb. And the idea of, oh, there's a vulnerability. What's somebody going to do? Turn my light on and off? That's not what's happening, right? That is actually the attack vector that's used to attack other devices. And if you're not updating that light bulb, and I don't know many people that manually go through and update the firmware on their light bulbs, I think we have a hard enough time with our smoke detectors and making sure that those batteries are replaced, that the automation and the security for these devices has really fallen to us as an industry. We can't rely on the consumer to go and do all of these things that we've asked them to do for some of the other devices they own. And that's where MAAWG is really engaged.
So Ash, one of your key areas of focus as chair of the SIG has been to evangelize best practices for manufacturers and vendors in enhancing the security of their devices. Where does the onus fall for protecting the safety and security of end users?
I don't think that the onus entirely falls on one particular party. So I think that something sort of borrowing from what we have in the software as a service and cloud computing area, the shared responsibility model, I think plays really well here. And so if we think about the difference, everybody involved in delivering or consuming services delivered via IoT has some responsibility in securing the ecosystem, and that ultimately centers around protecting the customer and their information. So let's start with the customer, and within the context of abuse prevention for home IoT, the customer has some responsibility in this. They should set up the device properly. We want them to make good decisions and to buy devices from manufacturers who are known to be very responsive to security issues and issuing updates in a timely manner, things like that. But the consumer doesn't really have enough information to make an informed decision as far as understanding the risk, when they're purchasing and implementing these devices. So beyond that, further up the chain, we have the supplier, or the party that's responsible for creating and managing the service, be that software that's installed on the device itself, or software that's maybe hosted in the cloud and interacts with the device. But the supplier is actually in the most powerful position to positively affect the security of the IoT ecosystem. The supplier has the ability to insist on hardware that will be performant while being secure. And more specifically, that would be, making sure that you're getting a hardware build that supports good performance with encrypted storage. It's a little bit more expensive, but it is the right thing to do most of the time. So the supplier is in a position where they can insist on that as the baseline build for the hardware that they ship their software on, for instance. And then beyond that, the supplier can also craft an experience for the consumer where the consumer has to achieve a certain level of security with that device that they're implementing in their home before it will actually activate and become operational. So having sort of a secure by default approach, and then requiring a technologist's understanding to turn off certain security features with the understanding or with the expectation that if you're turning off a security feature, then you understand the implications. So taking a little bit different design philosophy might help as well, but there are challenges there, just like there are challenges, for users that we want to make better purchasing and implementation decisions. The supplier also is typically very sensitive to having a very involving setup process, because you're balancing user experience against the security posture, and as the user experience is sort of a competitive area. So when you further implement security controls, that also has an impact on interoperability. And if interoperability is a challenge, the more steps a customer has to take in order to operationalize these devices that they're buying, the more likely they are to get frustrated. And so it's a very interesting balancing act that the supplier has to manage in order to deliver these solutions. But I do believe that the supplier is in the best position to make these changes and to bring us to a healthier, more secure state broadly across the IoT ecosystem. It's just these missing pieces. How do we get users meaningful information so that they don't get over their head with a new device purchase? And how do we allow suppliers to do better as far as secure interoperability? And those missing pieces, if we can find a way to get the right folks together to help craft those solutions, that's how we think that MAAWG can help.
So, Ash and Brian, with millions of connected devices set to be made in the next couple of years alone, it seems that many companies would be interested in ensuring the security of these devices. Where do you see the SIG member companies focusing their efforts, and how can that effort be strengthened?
SIG member companies collaboration between these companies, I think, is the most important thing at this point. It's making sure that, moving toward an ecosystem where a customer can select best of breed components for how they want their home IoT to function. Getting wireless speakers from one vendor and getting that to work with a TV from a different vendor and things like that. That's sort of a desired end state that we want to enjoy, the experience that we want to have with our IoT, and we want that to be secure. And the only way that can happen is if we get, these different stakeholders across the industry, the stakeholders and the decision makers, to talk. And so that's what MAAWG is really good at, is building bridges between organizations and helping those, fostering an environment where those important conversations can happen.
And Brian, do you have any?
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I think Ash really hit it, right? It's the to get the secure interoperability, you've got to have the open conversations, and you have to engender some level of trust between operators, right? The idea, if you pull out your phone, if you've got a bunch of IoT devices at home, you probably have a folder of IoT controls for your smart home, right? I have several on my phone, and I kind of pride myself on not being as bad as one gentleman that I know that has 49 apps on his phone. And the idea of the secure interoperability goes beyond just, hey, I want my TV and my speakers to work. It's really about setting the scene, right? And saying, okay, look, I am going to be away from the house for 2 nights, but I want it to look like I'm home. So turn lights on in these random situations, right? Maybe turn the music on, get turn the heat down because I don't need that in the winter, that kind of thing. Or when I'm home, change the blinds, turn the heater back up. All of these things where you want to say, it may be 10, 15 devices that you're saying, I want you to do certain things at certain times. In order to get there, to have that secure interoperability all the way down to the controls on the phone, where you're saying one app, I want to control my devices through, that requires a good deal of trust. And I think that the best practices and understanding where those standards are and how that security works enables a company to say, yes, we want our device to be able to be controlled through an app that maybe we didn't write. And I think that's one of those, it's kind of a mental hurdle that I think people are trying to get over. And to Ash's point, I think that secure interoperability and the communication between the companies, that's the critical part. And that's where we get to come together and meet and stop the anti-abuse here at MAAWG.
Where can MAAWG engage for IoT SIG? Like if you're part of MAAWG and you want to engage, how would you go about doing it?
So I think the first answer is come and join the SIG. We have a number of opportunities, some of the things that we were looking at and engaged in, where we're looking at standards that exist. We're looking at open source solutions that exist. We're looking at how we integrate with other groups like the DDoS SIG at MAAWG, how there can be some communication between those. I think the policy and regulatory inside MAAWG, the conversations that are happening there, but depending on where your interests lie, I think there's some other issues that are profound that we have not yet really been able to tackle. So one of those that I think is worth bringing up is privacy. And the idea of these IoT devices that know what room you are in your house, that know what your behaviors are, that know what your heart rate is, and know your location at all times. You start to add up some of what the devices know about us and how that data gets used. And we get to a spot where we should probably talk about how privacy with the devices that are connected to us and connected to our lives may impact us. I think there's another area here where we start talking about IoT devices in the medical context and the benefits of having access to those, how they need to connect potentially differently than other devices, and to whom, how that information is protected, how it's shared with the right parties. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to really grow this.
So for the viewers out there who want to learn more about the SIG, where could they go get more information?
Well, that's on the MAAWG website. I think that we may be restructuring the way that some of that stuff is presented on the website in the near future, but definitely head to MAAWG.org and search for IoT.
Great.
So if you're watching this through the blog, we're going to have a bunch of links to resources that are available there. So if you're reading it there, you should have access to that immediately.
Great. So I want to thank you both for your time. It was a really great conversation on an increasingly large part of the anti-abuse space. So stay tuned for our next edition of MAAWG 5, and feel free to reach out via our contact us form to suggest more topics or guests. Thank you both.